Okay, well, let's start with that one. It's the only religious picture I could find referring to spring, and it's the Garden of Eden, and it has Adam and Eve as little figures in this big sort of luscious orchard, and God is up there having a look at them, and Eve is pointing to an apple. Now, as we know, apples don't grow in spring. But I think in the Garden of Eden, probably it was always spring. There were no seasons. It was perfect weather, perfect climate all the time. So I guess that explains it. There are various sort of styles of depicting spring. This is a very prosaic Dutch view of spring, which is the asparagus growing. This is a Japanese view, which is in a sense quite similar to subsequent European views, which is just a simple picture of flowers and of spring. There's nothing mythological, nothing religious about it. And that image in particular became quite famous in Europe later on, and became a model for European depictions of spring. Meanwhile, we still, in the sort of 19th century, we have this sort of very sort of ordinary English landscape, and that's an American version of it. The same thing. Spring has clouds as well as sunshine and blossom, and I'm not quite sure what's going to come next. Right now, the Impressionists. Edward Manet, I guess, was an early one. That's not a particularly impressionistic picture. Depicted spring as a view, essentially. It was a pretty picture of what was going on. And that, I mean, as we came in halfway through, is very different from the previous depictions of spring, particularly in the Renaissance, which were very much tied to classical mythology. Because the Renaissance painting had to be intellectually smart and clever. Well, it didn't have to be they didn't want pretty pictures like this. They wanted that. They wanted to show their understanding, their education, their sophistication about Greek and Roman mythology, and how that was presented through, or how spring was presented through that. We'll come to that in a minute. But meanwhile, these are impressionist nice views, rural ones and urban ones, and so on. Now, hopefully, next there will be. Well, no, there's one. Yes, I was hoping we could speed this up a bit. We'll go through a few sort of rather pretty pictures.
Why is she spring?
Because Renoir wanted. That's why Renoir. How Renoir wanted to present spring. Now, if you go back to the Japanese one, that's Van Gogh, who's stolen it, and he's admitted he's stolen it. But it very much influenced European art in the late 19th century, and that is also actually based on Japanese designs. Van Gogh also did, as we'll see in a moment, his normal stuff, which you will kind of recognise as Van Gogh, probably, like that. But the Greek and Roman mythological origins started with a lady called Proserpina, or Persephone, who in Latin turned out to be Proserpina. And Proserpina had a fate. She was carried off into the underworld by Hades in order to be queen of the underworld. And whether that's her escaping, and that will be explained in a moment. Her mother was the goddess of crops, of wheat and barley and stuff, and was very distressed that she'd disappeared into Hades, and refused to allow crops to grow. So that led to a big negotiation with the King of the Underworld, Hades, who then, after some comings and goings, agreed that she should come out for 6 months of the year. So she comes out in spring and enjoys summer in the outer world, then goes back into the underworld in autumn, and that is so the imagery is that she comes up in like the crops in the spring, and she represents spring, and then she goes back into the earth. Like you plant your seeds in the autumn, so you're planting your seeds back into the darkness of the earth, and they come up again in the spring, and that's Persephone. This is a Norwegian representation of what spring was like there. Now this is a totally different issue. This is the Rite of Spring was a piece of music and a ballet in 1913 that caused a lot of controversy. That was the set we saw. This is the performance at the time, and it was the Rite of Spring was based on some idea of pagan Russian mythology, and it's lived throughout over a century. And this is a production made quite recently. Looks slightly different, but it's the Rite of Spring has survived throughout the last century or so. German Expressionism took on spring. This is, I guess, a bit gaudy, but it's and then American Modernism. This is George O'Keeffe in the early part of the last century, and then spring gets depicted in a lot of very sort of more obscure ways. This is Salvador Dali, who has decided that spring looks like this. And
maybe in London.
And Magritte had a different take on it, and then there will be others. Cy Toomley is abstract expressionist American.
I think they've got that in Tate Modern, haven't they?
I think that's where it is. Yes, that's where I stole it from. And Bridget Riley, op art British artist. Her Persephone looks like that. That's the sort of art she did. So she decided that was what Persephone.
Very abstract.
Yes, yeah. Very postmodern. Jeff Koons, sort of famous for all sorts of sort of rather garish.
Yeah, very understated.
And then science fiction and fantasy art has also taken up images of Persephone as spring with the flower in her hand and so on. And this is very sort of obvious of spring when she's above ground, and winter and autumn when she's below ground on each side of that image. David Hockney does spring. This is one of his iPad paintings, drawings, what do you call it actually? iPad works anyway, which he's been doing a lot of recently. He did a whole series of day by day different images of spring. And up to the present day, this one and the next one are commercial artists working now, they're producing work for people to buy for their flats and their living rooms and so on. That's one, and that's another. Very different images, but that is the absolute contemporary sort of on sale in your local art dealers shop right now. That's the end. This is beginning. A long time ago, people were painting on the walls. depicting spring. And I think actually I've said most of what I need to say about the mythology. The other feature in mythology is Flora, who's the goddess of flowers, who's fairly obvious image for spring, and she shows up fairly often.
Here she is.
That is Roman Flora, indeed. And then there's a huge gap from 100 AD to 1400 or so, because that's when nobody was allowed to paint anything other than god things. And then we got the Renaissance, and it was sort of very complex Greek mythology imagery in that.
Bit of Garden of Eden,
Yes.
in that that's all the trees, the fruits.
It's actually a Florence orchard. Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much it. I mean,
We haven't got back to Adam and Eve yet. Who painted that Adam and Eve that we saw?
Nicolas Poussin,
Thank you.
French 17th century guy. Yeah, I mean, one of the sort of interesting things is that there's a time when
That's stunning.
That's God.
That's really lovely. I think that's really nice.
that's a 16th century sense of humour.
Yes.
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 And he did all the other seasons.
It's so surreal. I love it.
In the same picture.
Who was Zephyr?
Hmm?
Zephyr, that's
Zephyr was the west, as a gentle westerly breeze who comes in spring and summer, and was married to Flora. That's the original of Jeff Koons's thing.
Oh.
There's a little second. Yes.
That's yes. That's a pretty sort of ramshackle bunch of classical allegories that Poussin put together. I think
We old people are meant to go in the spring. We never appear, do we? We're young.
I think that's really.
You'll have your time.
That's it.
Yes,
Yes.
God.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Ian.
So I'm going to try and read a new, you'll see if you recognise it as we start, and it's set just here in Southwark, just up the road. And I may not be able to read it very well, but I'll have a go. One that April with his shorest suit, the drought of March hath pierced to the root, and lagged every vein in switch liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. When Zephyrus eke with his sweet breath inspired hath in every holt and heath, the tender croppers and the young son hath in the ram his half quarters run, and small fowls make a melody that sleepen all the night with open ee. So pricketh him nature in his courages. Then longing folk to go on pilgrimages, and palmers for to seeken strange strongs, to fern harvest hath in sundry launders, and specially from every shire end of England to Canterbury they wend, the holy blissful martyr for to seek, that hen hath holpen what they there were seek. Befell that in that season on a day, in Southwark, at the Tabard, as I lay, ready to wender on my pilgrimage to Canterbury, with full devout courage, at night was come into that hostelry, well 29 in a company of sundry folk, by aventure y folly, in fellowship and pilgrims were they all, that towards Canterbury wouldn't ride. The chambers and the stables one wide, and well we won est at beast, and shortly, when the sun was to rest, so had I spoken with him every chon, that I was of here fellowship anon, and made forward early for to rise, to take our way there, as I yow devise. But none the less, while I have time and space, ere that I further in this tale pace, methinketh in accordance to resound to tell you all the condition of each of them, so as it seemed me, and which they weren't, and of what degree, and eke in what array that they were in, and at a night, than would I first begin. So there we are, it's the beginning of the Canterbury Tales, and I just thought it was rather fun, because it's just down the road, and it starts just right now.
What? This is not nearly as lyrical as that because it's Dylan Thomas. This was written in 1954. It's the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. He was very much concerned about aging and the passage of time and things like this. But it is about spring anyway. So it's the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower drives my green age that blasts the roots of trees, is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. And I am dumb to mouth into my veins, here at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail, and I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the handsman's line. The lips of time leach to the fountain head, love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood should calm her sores, and I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars, and I am dumb to tell of lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm.
Thank you. Yeah.
This poem has been written by Sapna, and unless anyone else is to read it, shall I read it for you? Yeah? Okay. Here we go. Something new is happening on Earth. Nature's babies are born today, and nature is finally awake after a hard, cold winter. Flowers anew spring up from the ground. A new cycle of life comes around, with new hopes and dreams for this year. We cannot all live in fear of winter again, and I stand on the doorstep of time, waiting for hope to return. And as winter closes its eyes, spring opens its. So let the flowers remind you that hope is around the corner, for hope is in every leaf of every tree, in every flower that blooms forth, and in every animal that springs to life. After a long, hard winter of hibernation, for rainbows are everywhere if you look for them. Someone special told me that once, and I believe him now. Spring is here.
I decided to play is from the mid-70s, written by Bob Dylan from his album, I think it's Blood on the Tracks, and it's called If You See Her, Say Hello. Might be in Tangier. She left here last early spring, is living there I hear. Say for me that I'm alright, though things get kinda slow. She might think that I've forgotten her. Don't tell her it isn't so. We have a falling out, like lovers often will. But to think of how she left that night, it still gives me a chill. our separation, it pierced me to the heart. Well, she still lives inside of me. We've never been apart. If you get close to her, kiss her once for me. I've always respected her for doing what she didn't get in free. Whatever makes her happy, no, I won't stand in a way. But the bitter taste still lingers on from the night I tried to make her stay. I see a lot of people as I make the rounds, and I hear a name here and there as I go from town to town. I've never gotten used to it, I've just learned to turn it off. Well, either I'm too sensitive, or else I'm getting soft. Sundown, yellow moon, I replay the past. I know every scene by heart, they all went by so fast. If she's passing back this way, well, I'm not that hard to find.